There's this story Chuck Swindoll told about a couple who were not long married. He was a good-looking guy and she was a pretty young thing, and they had their whole lives ahead of them. And then, on one terrible day, the man was involved with a chemical accident at work and his face was burned, leaving him alive, but terribly disfigured. The man sunk into a deep depression. He locked himself in a room and he refused to let anyone in, even, or more accurately, especially his wife. He told her that he wanted her to divorce him. He didn't want her wasting her life on someone as ugly as he now was. No matter how much she protested and declared her love, the door remained firmly closed between them. One afternoon, in desperation, the woman went to see a plastic surgeon. She described the situation and the exact extent of her husband's disfigurement. The plastic surgeon assured her that he could certainly help to significantly reconstruct her husband's face. The woman shook her head no, saying the doctor had misunderstood her. She wanted him to change her face to resemble her husband's. Her last hope was that if she took on his image, he would allow her to draw closer to him again, that he'd open the door to her and they could be reunited. What love. It reminds me of that passage in Philippians 2, verse 6 to 8, that begins, who, Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant. Or, to put it a little more clearly, here it is again in the Good News translation. He, Jesus, always had the nature of God, but he didn't think that by force he should try to remain equal with God. Instead of this, of his own free will, he gave up all he had and took the nature of a servant. He became like a human being and appeared in human likeness. He was humble and walked the path of obedience all the way to death, his death on the cross. God loved us so much that God became like us, to draw closer to us in experience and in understanding. God was willing to endure great pain in order to look like us, to get us to open the door to him. Jesus, who was very God in human flesh, experienced it all. A humble birth, a rural childhood, rejection by his family when he chose a path of his own rather than the one they had all laid out for him, the love of friends, the betrayal of friends, lots of hard work, lots of laughter, joy and sorrow. And finally, upon challenging the world's status quo with the good news of freedom, he also experienced death on a cross. Jesus came to our rescue. He loved us, and he died that we could live. He came to tell us that. Twice in today's scripture, the prophet Zephaniah says that the Lord your God is with you. The Lord your God is with you. I don't think that it's any coincidence that the announcing angel told Mary that she would call her baby's name Emmanuel, meaning God with us. When we are feeling exhausted from the load of doing it all, or simply worn out from dealing with life, don't we sometimes feel just a little sorry for ourselves and wonder, well, who looks after me? Zephaniah says God sees our exhaustion and God sees our needs. Like a tender parent, God will gather us up in caring arms and take us home. This God who is with us is pictured also as an avenger who will deal with all of those who have oppressed God's people. God will be the defending big brother, the fierce older sister who will deal with all of the bullies. This God who is with them is present and protective. This God is not far off or a stern judge, as one had previously thought, but is pictured as a warrior who will come right out there to tend to the wounded and will lead them back to safety. At Christmas, we frequently see Mary with the baby Jesus cradled in her arms, maybe soothing him back to sleep with a song. But Zephaniah gives us another, more masculine image of a mighty warrior who will rejoice over his people with singing. What is he singing, I wonder? Maybe it's a victory song about how God's might has prevailed. But I wonder if maybe it could also be a tender lullaby. And it's not as crazy as it sounds. When a baby is baptized, we remember this passage in Zephaniah. We imagine God's delight in welcoming these little ones, how God's exuberant joy spills out in song. As I hold a baby in my arms before wetting her head, I declare to her that God will rejoice over you with singing. And there is love, love, love in every note. The best known Bible verse is John 3:16 for a reason, I think. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but should have everlasting life. We resonate with that assurance that despite our foolishness, despite our sin, despite our insistence upon independence, even while we were still sinning, God so loved us and so became God with us, a divine child among the masses. I invite you to watch this video next.